George Russell. Now, when you're driving fast and someone's in your way, who are you going to call? George Russell. What happened at Monaco 2025 was an abomination. Okay, and this man got a 20-second penalty for it. This video is going to examine the validity of that penalty, whether it was right, because there are two sides to this. Firstly, the car that was blocking Russell off, was that committing an infringement? And the answer to that question is yes, it was. Let's have a look. In the 2025 sporting regulations, at no time may a car be driven unnecessarily slowly, erratically, or in a manner which could be deemed potentially dangerous. Now, they were driving in an erratic, slow manner which was potentially dangerous. When you are braking in an area of the track, slowing down in an area of the track where your fellow competitor is not expecting that, you are risking the collision. You are risking them piling into the back of you because you are not driving appropriately racing on that motor racing circuit. You are driving unnecessarily slowly. You're doing so as a tactical reason to benefit your teammate. That is not acceptable. They don't tell you that. That goes against the show narrative. This is the FIA International Sporting Code that says exactly the same thing. It is not permitted to drive any car unnecessarily slowly, erratically, or in a manner deemed potentially dangerous to other drivers at any time. And that is what George Russell was confronted by. So he was having to deal with somebody who was perpetrating that infringement against him. So what did he do?
To avoid a collision from Albon, just slammed on the brakes.
So we need to give that position back to Albon.
I'll take the penalty. He's driving erratically.
It's going to be an interesting Grand Prix Drivers Association meeting next time around.
It is, but honestly, I mean, as I say, the penalties available are 5-second penalty, 10-second penalty, pit drive-through, or a stop and go, which costs you over half a minute.
18 seconds, 15.7 seconds now between Verstappen and Piastri.
Yeah, they've chosen the. Sorry to interrupt you there,
right,
they've given Russell a drive-through, so a 20-second penalty for the for being very cheeky, basically.
Yeah. I think he's going to be furious about that. He feels that the Williams has just been going too slow, but there's nothing in the rules that says you can't drive in the way that Alex Albon is, because he's not going so slow. It's dangerous. No. Now, Kimi Antonelli does exactly the same thing to Alex Albon, and they go through to back, and he hasn't given the place back, and I'm not surprised, because Albon is so far back, Antonelli would have had to have slammed the brakes on to let Albon through.
Sky Sports tell you that there's nothing in the rules. How come I can tell you that there is something in the rules? Is that not a problem that Sky Sports F1, the contracted broadcaster, can't inform you that the rules are such that, here they are, Crofty, at no time may a car be driven unnecessarily slowly, erratically, or in a manner which could be deemed potentially dangerous to the drivers or any other person. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen a car leave the track and gain an advantage. There's mitigating circumstances here as well for George to do that. George was following a car that was driving dangerously. Driving erratically was a danger to George. The potential for a collision with a car that was driving erratically and dangerously is high, and hence George took the matters into his own hands and took that decision. When you're not receiving the protection from the governing body, from the stewards, from the officials of the sport to protect you from erratic driving by penalising the erratic driving, then that makes you feel like you need to take the law into your own hands. None of us should be put in that position. Laws are there to protect us, and law enforcement is there to ensure that there is a consequence for those perpetrators, and therefore some sort of justice is restored. if we find ourselves victims of a situation and there is no consequence for the perpetrators, then it leaves you in a situation where you feel you need to take the law into your own hands to restore justice to the situation. Imagine being in a football match and one of your opponents is intent on injuring you. They're more than willing to try and take you out at the knee. Go into sliding challenges where they're going knee height, happy to take your knee out. And every time it happens, the referee just waves play on. When's it going to stop? When your leg is broken? Or does it make you have to defend yourself by demonstrating that you're not going to tolerate that sort of conduct and therefore conduct a foul of your own to ensure that the perpetrator is aware that there is a consequence for their actions, and if they persist in doing that, then you will persist in that form of retribution. It should never get to that, but this is the problem. When the officiating is so weak, the officiating is corrupt, then it forces drivers to take that sort of action, which is not acceptable. But the root cause of it is the officiating. Now, let's have a look at other examples. Here's one that Martin was telling us about not so long back.
Yeah, but Max came off the brake pedal to carry speed in to claim his right to go across the runoff area. He's so clever. He's got so much control over the car. He games the system, but he lost out on that particular.
Max is so clever. He came off the brakes to claim his right to the runoff area. Max is so clever, you see. Max games the system. He's got so much control over his car as Max. Now, what did Max get as a penalty for gaming the system, for having so much control and claiming his right to the runoff area? Let's have a look, shall we? We see back at that Saudi Grand Prix of 2025, there was another driver, Lawson, the other B team guy, the guy that was doing the erratic driving this time as well. But he claimed his right. No, he didn't try and claim his right to the runoff area. He left the track and gained the lasting advantage. You could see he was at least trying to make that corner on the track, but didn't stay within track limits when he was attempting the overtake. But you could actually see he was attempting to stay on the track there rather than just take his foot off the brake to claim his right to the runoff area and game the system. He got a 10-second time penalty for overtaking off the track and gaining a lasting advantage. Okay, so the explanation given is while he completed the overtake before turn 1, the speed that he carried into the turn meant that he could not navigate turn 1 without leaving the track. He therefore could not successfully overtake car 7 without leaving the track and thereby gained a lasting advantage which he did not give back. So what he's done, he's gone into a corner too fast, out of control and not able to remain on the track. So that's an infringement of driving out of control, isn't it? So not only is Lawson out of control, he's gained a position by going off the track that he didn't give back and got a 10-second penalty. Compare that with George Russell. George Russell was experiencing erratic driving that was dangerous, and he elected to bypass that situation for his own safety, accepting that he would be penalised, but actually choosing to accept that the penalty is going to be better than being kept in a situation that leaves me at risk, in grave jeopardy of an incident when I'm being subjected to this kind of erratic driving. A 10-second penalty to somebody, though, that drove out of control, not able to keep their car on the track, gained an advantage in doing so and didn't give that advantage back. So that was a 10-second penalty for Lawson at Saudi. Young Maxwell here, the man who's got so much car control that he exercised his right to the runoff area, gamed the system, because he's the expert of the rules, is Max. He got just a 5-second time penalty. just a 5-second time penalty, which was based on the driver standards guidelines. It was therefore, so here we go. The stewards reviewed all that, okay. Determined that car 81 had its front axle at least alongside the mirror of car 1 prior to and at the apex of corner 1. Now, what that means is car 81, Oscar, was ahead. The car on the inside was ahead, meaning the car on the outside is behind. In order to be left track room, then the car on the outside has to be at least level. It's not. What does the car on the outside have to do? It has to yield. That's the rules and regulations of overtaking, even though they'll lie to you about that. What did Max do? Did Max yield? No. Max took his foot off the brake to exercise his right to the runoff area, gaming the system and cutting the corner and gaining that position back because he was behind, and he then ended up ahead by cutting that corner, by making a decision to accept a penalty to take that position, not attempting to make the corner, not attempting to stay out on track. No. Got on the radio presenting that he was the victim, though. Got on the radio to present that that was simply effing lovely, did Max. Always the victim, never the perpetrator, is Maxwell Verstappen. But based on the driving standard guidelines, it was therefore car 81's corner, and he was entitled to be given room. Now, you see, it was entitled to Oscar's corner. Max wasn't entitled to room. Max had to yield. Car 1 then left the track because it didn't yield, and gained a lasting advantage that was not given back. He stayed in front of car 81 and sought to build on that advantage. Ordinarily, the baseline penalty for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage is 10 seconds. However, given that this was lap 1 and turn 1 incident, we considered it to be a mitigating circumstance and imposed a 5-second time penalty instead. So you see, the stewards can look at what they deem to be mitigating circumstance. What is the word mitigation? Mitigation is when there is a factor involved which could justify somebody's conduct. The factor being lap 1, turn 1. Well, no. You see, lap 1, turn 1, or anywhere around lap 1 where the congestion level is high, applies to a situation where, due to the level of congestion, there is nowhere else for you to go other than leave the track to avoid a collision. And that is mitigating circumstances. That is a valid reason to leave the track. And in doing so, and the momentum means that in keeping control of your car, in the momentum of the situation, in all of the unfolding chaos, you end up altering position off the track. That goes down as mitigating circumstances. That is best dealing with that unfolding situation. That wasn't the situation for Max Verstappen. It was quite simple. There was only 2 cars involved at that point because everybody else was behind, and Max was required to yield, and he didn't. Had Max have yielded, that wouldn't have resulted in a collision. No, rather than do that, Max would not yield. Max carried on. So that's not mitigating circumstance that they presented it as being. That was no reason, no valid reason to knock 5 seconds off what should have been the standard penalty. In fact, what Max did was game the system, ignored the fact that he was supposed to yield, supposed to tuck him behind. No, he ignored that. He chose to come off the brakes, exercise his so-called right to the runoff area, and gain the position illegally. And then he drove off into the distance, or tried to. Let's look at what George did, and let's look at how they describe that. So, Monaco, George, he left the track and gained a lasting advantage. Yeah, he did, didn't he? He got a drive-through penalty, the equivalent of a 20-second penalty. See the 3 infringements here. Which one's the worst? Which one is the worst? Which one was faced with the circumstance of being faced with dangerous driving that they are having to contend with? Oh, that would be George. That wasn't Max, and it wasn't Liam Lawson. So the only mitigation here is that the driver that has left the track has done so because he felt that his race was being impacted by somebody purposefully committing a driving infringement, purposefully driving erratically and slow to benefit their teammate, and that was presenting a danger to George Russell. That is entirely valid. That is entirely mitigating circumstances. You are confronted by somebody who is doing something wrong, who's not being penalised. Car 63 left the track at turn 10 and overtook car 23. He did not give that position back and maintained his track position. It was clear from the radio message that he said he would not hit, so he would take the penalty, that the overtake was done deliberately as he felt he was being held up by car 23 driving erratically. Yeah, he told you that the car in front was driving erratically, which is a penalty, which you ignored. Anticipating that, so you anticipated in advance that this could be a problem, and what have you done about it, FIA? You anticipated, yeah, you saw Roadblock Alonso do this back in, I think it was 2022. Anticipating that situations such as this might happen at this Monaco Grand Prix, all the teams were informed before the race by the race director, at the steward's request, that the stewards would look carefully at a deliberate leaving of the track at turn 10 to overtake a car or a train of slow cars. That communication also made it clear that the guideline penalty of 10 seconds may be insufficient for this deliberate infringement, and that the penalty applied may be greater. That's to be a greater penalty than 10 seconds. What about the deliberate infringement of driving slowly and erratically? What about that one? At no time may a car be driven unnecessarily slowly, erratically, or in a manner which could be deemed potentially dangerous. What about that deliberate infringement? What penalty does that get for a deliberate infringement? Because we had Lawson guilty of that, and then we had the two Williams drivers guilty of that. And yet, when the cars are trying to negate that because you're not punishing it, you smash them with a 20-second penalty, and a guy that had also chosen to ignore the rules and regulations, ignore what you're supposed to do, and seek to gain that advantage by gaming the system, choosing to come off the brakes, choosing to go over the runoff area, choosing to take that position that they'd lost at that corner. Oh, he just gets a 5-second penalty, and we'll pretend that there's mitigating circumstances there, yet ignore the only true circumstance, which is mitigating. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of old Giorgio here. I'm really not. I'm really not. And I didn't like hearing him go, I'll take the penalty. I don't like that kind of conduct. It's not right. But ultimately, it's the weak officiating that forced him to have to do that. Was the officiating strong in this show, then he wouldn't be having to contend with that kind of conduct from the other drivers. And so what he did, he took a stand there. And it's an example that actually needs to be highlighted to other people. It doesn't matter whether you like this guy or not. He shouldn't have been exposed to that kind of erratic and dangerous driving, which he was. So in electing to do something about it, they then slam him. Now again, it's yet another example of a driver committing an infringement and getting a 20-second, ultimately a drive-through is going to cost about 20 seconds of your race time. 20-second penalty for that. And somebody else chooses to go off the track and gain positioning and then try and gain an advantage on that. Oh, we'll just give him 5. And isn't it strange how it's always the same driver that benefits? You've got comparable situations all the time. It's always the same driver where it's no further action required, or just a 5-second penalty that you can take whenever you think is going to be most beneficial for you to take it. It's how filthy this show is. Now, if Formula One ever wants to return to being a sport, which it's not going to under this present regime, what it needs is leaders. What it needs is strong individuals who are not willing to tolerate the bullshit. And that includes a driver's steward who's going to expose the individuals who are perpetrating, expose the teams who are guilty of perpetrating, and demand that stiff action and stiff penalties, consequences, are applied to those perpetrators, applied to those teams. Because these rules are there and the consequence system is there for everybody's protection. And it's your roles, it's the responsibilities of those in these positions to ensure that these rules and regulations are upheld in the manner that they need to. So, man up, princess, and do your fucking job. Thank you all for your time.